Hi, welcome to Raising Healthy Kids, Maximizing Your Family's Health Without Drugs, Vaccines, Surgeries, and Your Physician. This is Dr. Tressler, and I have done this successfully with my 5 children and passing this information on to my kids now that are having their kids, so I'm having grandkids. We have to look at the reality of America and where this all starts. Since 2000, America's life expectancy plummeted from 38th to 68th by 2019. Americans spend about $4,500 extra per person each year on health care. That's $12,500 a year. Medical care, pharmaceuticals, procedures are the number 3 cause of death. Death rates among infants 751 to 100,000 live births. U.S. has the highest infant maternal mortality rates despite the most health care spending. So we spend the most. We have so much technology, yet we have so many deaths. So it's just a bad system, and it has been for a long time. This is not anything new. This is not a chiropractic thing. This is factual. So when you look at facts, you have to realize you're part of this. You're part of America. You can accept it or do something about it. 54% of children have chronic illness. 1 in 8 have asthma. 1 in 5 have allergies. 1 in 12 have food allergies. 30% have ADHD or behavior disorders. And teenagers contemplating suicide, 25%. Mental health disorders, 1 in 6. Chronic ear infections, sinus, constipation, GI issues, and many more. This is the reality of our kids right now. And I've been in practice 30 years, and this was not the situation 30 years ago. It has been getting worse every year, every decade. It just keeps getting worse. Is health our birthright? Or are we born into a sickness in a system that is, we just have to, accept? So here's a quote: don't believe anything, not one thing put out there by a pharmaceutical company. Just don't believe it. You start from there. Who do you think quotes something like that? A naturopath, a chiropractor, some fitness guy? Well, it's this lady, Catherine, editor in chief journal of the American Medical Association. So this is coming from their own camps. This is nothing new. How are we so deceived? Is it the medical doctors? Is it the hospitals? Is it the clinics? Well, when we look into this, and there was a book I read by a medical doctor, and he investigated Vioxx. It's a pain medication. 25 million Americans had taken from 1999 to 2004. Trials were finding patients having heart attacks, yet it was pushed through the market. And I remember reading this back in the early 2000s, how it was pushed through, even in the trial runs, people were having heart attacks and dying. And what ended up happening in 5 years, 88,000 to 140,000 heart attacks in a 5 year period in the US. 40 to 60,000 Americans died from Vioxx. This is the amount of people who died in the Vietnam War. Why haven't we heard about this? And why didn't it go into further investigation? And once it was notified that they were uh, liable, nobody went to jail. They got a little slap on the hand. So what happens is drug companies run these trial studies. They report a summary to the medical journals. So they report the summary, not the journals summarizing and taking valid information. The medical journals publish the summary without investigating the full study, which is absolutely crazy. And doctors read the summary in the journal. Most articles may be hundreds of pages long. That's why it's just not being read. So doctors don't have the time to sit there and read a 500-page document. They read the summary and they trust the information that's coming from the medical journals is truth. And then the drug reps promote the summary. They entice the doctor with a new med. That's all it is. It's a sales process. So if we trust this is what you're trusting. Garbage. Bottom line, the system is broke. So you can either follow the system, which is you go to your doctor, listen to the doctor without doing your own research, listen to your neighbors and family, take the drugs, do the vaccines. or you can become your own advocate. You do the research before your child gets sick. You have a health related doctor to support you, could be a chiropractor. You're proactive with adjustments, vitamins, healthy food choices, sunlight, play, plenty of water. It amazes me how many people don't even read the labels, like infant formula being. There was one infant formula a patient brought in, and their son was not doing well, had a lot of sickness and crying all day. And the first two ingredients, 47% was corn syrup. And the second ingredient was 27%, and that was vegetable oil. So 74% of the formula was vegetable oil and corn syrup. Total garbage. Read your labels. And you use medication only as a last resort. So you are still responsible for your child's health, whether you follow the doctor or you do your own research. This is your child. So when we look at vaccines, are they mandated for school? How about college, public or private? Well, right now, Pennsylvania has a state law. Children need not be immunized if the parent or guardian objects in writing on religious grounds. And it can even be strong moral or ethical conviction similar to a religious belief. So right now it's wide open in Pennsylvania. And I'm going to show you why that you may want to really look into the vaccine thing for yourself and see. And I'm going to give you a rundown here that opened my eyes way before I ever had kids. I did this research, and back then, over 30 years ago, it was books, and the books were written by medical doctors. And it was eye-opening. I never vaccinated my children, all 5 of them. They went to public school, they went to private school, they went to public college, they went to private college, and were allowed to get through the system. So don't believe that you're forced to. That's a lie. That is a lie. So look at this picture. This is a picture of a river in Pittsburgh, which this is from the 1930s. Look at the garbage. And I'm going to give you an idea of why we were so sick and why we got so healthy. It wasn't the vaccines. So before the 1870s, all kinds of garbage and human waste was thrown into the streams and the creeks. This was a primary source of drinking water. Urban areas were contaminated with filth, garbage, and disease. Food and milk was contaminated, and it caused many deaths. In fact, there was a quote that said milk dealers were charged with serious offense of murdering annually 8,000 children because of the filth. And then this is why, we look at this, the death rates, the sickness and disease was so high. It wasn't that we didn't have a vaccine. It was we were living in filth, and we had no immune system. Young children and mothers worked long, hard hours. 12-year-old boys would start work about 3 a.m. and for working 10-year-old girls 14 and a half hours a day. For working women as much as 100 hours a week. So if you were that person or your kids were that age, would they be healthy just based on work output? There's no way. They were pale, thin, delicate, feeble, stunted in growth, more than usually susceptible to formidable diseases. This was what led to this and what led to all the disease. How is our immune system in something like this? It's not good, and it couldn't be, nor could any of us have a strong immune system. So I'm going to go through a lot of statistics here, and I have some resources for you as we go along. But just to highlight, I'm not going to debate these, and I'm just going to highlight them. In 1764, an article on smallpox. In the 38 years preceding the start of inoculation in 1721, death from smallpox was 90 per 1,000. After the start of inoculation, deaths from smallpox increased 127 per 1,000, a 41% increase after the shots were given. We look at an 1844 epidemic. About a third of the vaccinated contracted smallpox, but roughly 8% of those vaccinated still died. And nearly 2/3 had severe disease. 1872 to 1873 epidemic, fatal to 1,040 persons, was the most severe experience in Boston since the introduction of vaccines. There was an outbreak in Bavaria, Germany in 1871. Of the 30,000 cases, 29,429 were in vaccinated persons, 95.7%, and 1,313 were the unvaccinated. So were the vaccines working? I mean, obviously, with this statistic, both of these, obviously not. There was an epidemic in Italy, mind blowing. 18,110 deaths in 10 villages. All were perfectly vaccinated. 1899, in which vaccination has been performed twice a year in the most satisfactory manner for most years past, many years past. In 1948, 200 to 300 deaths as a result of smallpox vaccination. During the same time, there had been only one smallpox death. Forced vaccinations. From the mid 1800s into the 1900s, governments supported vaccines. Boston, Massachusetts, 1902. 125 surgeons, accompanied by policemen, went house to house vaccinating all who had not been recently inoculated with smallpox. Those who refused would be hauled off to court. This is absolutely incredible. With orders to force vaccination, personal choice and freedom were disregarded by the state. Vaccines were resisted. Where vaccines were resisted, police sometimes accompanied health officials using heavy-handed tactics to carry out their goal of vaccination. So you look at this is 1902. The stuff we're hearing today is nothing new. This went on, over 100 years ago. Developed nations require the most vaccines, tend to have the worst infant mortality rates. U.S. requires infants to receive 26 vaccine doses, the most in the world, yet 33 nations had better infant mortality rates. Infants who receive the most vaccines have the worst hospitalization and death rates. Infants who received 5 of the vaccine doses were significantly more likely to be hospitalized or die compared to infants who received 1 to 4 vaccines. Fully vaccinated children significantly more likely to require emergency care than under-vaccinated. Respiratory illness, fever, pharyngitis. So even with that, if you're choosing to vaccinate, maybe you want to do less. You spread them out. They don't tell you this information. They won't tell you this in the doctor's office or the hospital. Infants who had the DTaP vaccines with mercury, twice the risk of autism. Boys who received Hep B with mercury, 9 times more likely to be developmentally disabled. 1991, CDC recommended that all U.S. infants receive 3 doses of the Hep B with mercury starting at birth. 1991 to 1999, look at this, since 1991, they recommend 3 doses. In those 8 years, number of children required special education services for autism increased by 500%. Coincidence? Causative? You don't know. Before age 2, 32 vaccinations, 7 vaccines injected into a 13-pound, 2-month-old infant are equivalent to 70 doses in a 130-pound adult. Is this safe? Thimerosal-containing vaccines are neurotoxic, damaging the nerve system, and should not be given to pregnant women or children. U.S. Environmental Protection Agency limits mercury in drinking water to 2 parts per billion. Watch this. Vaccines with trace amounts of thimerosal contain 600 parts per billion. So the EPA says drinking water can have more than 2 parts per billion, but the vaccines have 600 parts per billion, and we're giving this to pregnant women and young kids. You can, if you want to scan those, it's just neurodevelopmental disorders. We look at the bottom there. Children fully vaccinated against pertussis, Minnesota. Risk of pertussis doubled after 2 years after receiving the 5th dose of DTaP and increased 9-fold with 6 years of full vaccination. Oregon, risk of pertussis quadrupled within 6 years after full vaccination. So you don't see these statistics, and if you're on the fence and you look at this, you think, wait a second, my kid is not fully not going to get the disease if they get vaccinated. Obviously, they may have a higher risk to get the disease. Emergency room visits. Recently vaccinated with MMR, 1 in 167 vaccinated children had 1 or more ER visits. Small chickenpox vaccines, risk of shingles. chickenpox vaccine, chickenpox during childhood, watch this, is protective against coronary heart disease. To get it natural, it helps prevent heart disease. Something that back in the day you would have chickenpox parties. We actually had patients or friends come to the house when our kids had it. So here's a website, goproject180.com, and this information is from this. I'm just highlighting some things. Your chances of getting disease before the vaccine ever came out is less than 1%. This means you have over a 99% chance of never getting the disease they're vaccinating you for or your kids. So your chances of getting measles, mumps, diphtheria, all this stuff, less than 1%. Diphtheria before the vaccine in 1921, 0.1 chance of getting it. Percent chance. There's no barely any chance of getting it. No documented cases since 2003. So why are we still doing this? 1991, 17,911 cases of Hep B, most from promiscuous lifestyle. You can, unless you're a drug user, having sex, your chances of getting it very slim, 0.0071% chance of getting the disease. Mumps, 0.076 chance of getting mumps. Pertussis whooping cough, 0.33 chance of getting it. And if you got it, you had a 0.67 chance of dying. So not your risk is extremely low, and this can be treated with an antibiotic if you get it. MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, significantly increased seizures. Seizures 3 times more likely to occur during the initial 2 weeks after an MMR shot. The main reason people die from measles is vitamin A deficiency and or malnutrition. So, as we go along here, the main reason as parents, and I am a parent and I'm a grandparent, is I don't want my kids to get sick and I don't want them to die. So I have to look at this and say, what are the risks of getting a shot compared to the risks of them getting the disease? Well, I would rather risk a 0.00 some percent chance of them getting sickness and then treating them with medical care if necessary than injecting them and keeping my fingers crossed with these statistics. HPV affects 80% of sexually active adults. There are 200 different strands of HPV. 75% of them are not connected to cancer at all. If you get HPV, 90% of the time it's self-resolving in 2 years without treatment. Some of the side effects, you can scan that. Pretty scary stuff when you get the HPV. In fact, patients have told me, and personal friends have told me, when they had the shot, they had to wait in the waiting room for up to 45 minutes just in case they went into shock or had some kind of reaction. So do they protect? That's another thing. Well, what if they protect my kid and they don't get it and they get no side effects? There's always side effects to injections, the stuff we see or don't see. Measles, a mumps outbreak during highly vaccinated communities, 2016. So now we're up to date here. 41 students at Harvard came down with mumps, according to the public health department. Every single one of those students had been vaccinated. 2015, Illinois Department of Public Health, MMR, University of Illinois, where 300 students developed mumps, another outbreak among the highly vaccinated population. And it was fun. It was interesting when my one daughter was in 8th grade, the nurse called and said, Dr. Tressler, we have to inform you that there's been an outbreak of whooping cough in the school. And I said, well, that's interesting. And, why you call me? We have to call all the parents that were not vaccinated. Okay. So my next question was, how many people were infected with whooping cough? She said there have been 8 or 10, I believe, not a bunch. And I said, wow, okay, so 8 or 10. How many of those were vaccinated? There was a long pause, and then she said, well, all of them were. And I said, so you're calling me, a parent that didn't vaccinate my child, who's healthy, and all 10 of the people that got whooping cough were vaccinated? She goes, yes. And I said, well, shouldn't you be calling the vaccinated parents? She was not thrilled by my comments and questions, but I was serious about it. Like, why are you calling me? my kid is healthy. They're not the problem. And she had to get off the phone because she had a lot of people to call. But isn't that interesting? I mean, that was just a few years ago. And you wonder, why can't we see this, see the truth through this, and what's going on? So there was a study done. This was on Mercola, Dr. Mercola's site, vaccinated, unvaccinated, otitis media, ear infections, 19% with the vaccinated compared to 5.8% with the unvaccinated. Pneumonia, 6.4 to 1.2. So what they're showing is if you were vaccinated, you have a higher risk or a higher incidence of these diseases, this sickness, than if you were unvaccinated. Uh, it's, as it goes down that list. So it was quite interesting. Even chronic illness, 44% compared to 25%, nearly half. So this is, and I'll give you this website here in a second. These are the slides. I'm just going to kind of roll through this, but you'll see the incidence of pertussis and when the vaccine took place in 1957. So you can see it was 99.7% gone naturally. So because of that picture I showed you earlier, because of the environment, sanitation, sewage, drinking water, the filth, the long working hours with 5-year-olds and 10-year-olds had stopped, and we got healthy. By the time they introduced the vaccine, it was almost completely gone. Measles, 98.7% gone. You can see how the data, all these charts. I'm going to show you the website here in a second. Measles, scarlet fever, typhoid, whooping cough, diphtheria, over early 1900s and the 1800s. There were a lot of sickness. There was a lot of filth and garbage. And when things got cleaned up, by the time they introduced the vaccine, it was almost gone anyway. It's just, slide after slide where they show the introduction of the vaccine. And and this is where they say, like 1957, this one, how it came down from 1901 all the way to 1957. It was almost completely eradicated. They introduced the vaccine and say the vaccine finally eliminated whooping cough. Well, if they wouldn't have introduced the vaccine, can we speculate that it would have just gone away anyhow? Quite obvious. Here is the website, dissolvingillusions.com. If you go to that website, you can see there's so many of these graphs. They're just mind-blowing. What's interesting, too, is this was a study done on the umbilical cord, and they tested the umbilical cord, and it revealed 287 chemicals in a group of newborn umbilical cord blood. So this is a baby that hasn't even lived a day outside the womb, and it already had 287 chemicals in the umbilical cord. 180 of those were cancer causing. Wow. 217 toxic to the brain and the nerve system. 208 caused birth defects and abnormal development. Like, where did all these chemicals come from? Well, these are the vaccines that have accumulated in the mom. These are the vaccines that we get when we're pregnant. These are the medications. This is the toxic food. This is the toxic environment, the toxic tap water, the air we breathe. I mean, there's some things you're just not going to be able to avoid, but there's some you can. Why do you need a flu shot when you're pregnant? 30 some years ago when my wife first got pregnant, she stopped drinking caffeine and, would not take even an aspirin. Now, drugs and prescription drugs are looked at as being safe, which is absolutely mind-blowing to me. Here's the chemicals that were found in the umbilical cord. I'm not going to read through these. But if you look at the green and you look at the brain development linked to cancer, developed endocrine hormonal system linked to cancer, toxic to the endocrine system linked to cancer, cause liver and kidney damage. I mean, it's just, why would we want to do this? As parents, we want to keep our kids as healthy as possible, and it starts in the womb, and it starts, the day they're born after that. Most common vaccine ingredients in the CDC, you can read this. One of the first things when I heard this, 30 some years ago, probably 34 years ago, I remember hearing that formaldehyde was in the vaccines. And at the time, I was a chiropractic student, and we were doing dissection, and formaldehyde is used to embalm, the dead people. And I thought, why would formaldehyde? That can't be good to inject into a newborn. And that's what like started getting me interested. And I did my own research, which was quite alarming. But I was so thankful I did. I did my research. I didn't trust the people. So, are you willing to add these chemicals? I wasn't, and I'm still not to this day. This is a business. So in 2015 alone, Merck made 1.9 billion. So this is before COVID. 1.9 billion on just the vaccine. They make Gardasil HPV the number 2 profitable vaccine of all produced that year. Big Pharma ranked USD $90 billion in profits with COVID vaccines. Pfizer 2021 vaccine revenues 42.63 billion. Biotech 22.48 billion. It's just like wow. So the top 10 vaccine companies yielded $139.73 billion in 2021. Why do they want to push vaccines? Is it just business, or are they truly out to help your child? So the truth is vaccines are not safe. They are not. If you do your research and you dive deep enough, it's hard to find the research because Google and all the analytics block this stuff and they hide it. Vaccines do not make your child immune, as we saw in a lot of the outbreaks. Vaccines are toxic. Your child has a 99% chance, or over 99, of never getting the disease anyhow. Your child can be treated if they get sick, and it's your right. It's not the law to be free of vaccines. It's your choice. You raise your child. So I hope this helped, and you have to do your research. Look up those sites, the one book, the website, and a few of the websites. Just dive in, start reading, start utilizing the data, and do your own, make your own decisions. And if you need help, we're here to help you.